All right. I want to welcome you to today's webinar, and we've got a great crew of people here that have logged in so far, 67 and counting, and another webinar coming up this afternoon. My name is Tim Cole, and I work with Waypoint Church Partners along with the other fellows that you see here on our panel. And we are thankful that you're joining us during this kind of special session of a webinar, not a regularly planned one, to talk about what we're hearing from ministers and leaders around the region in the midst of these crazy times. And so before we dive into that, I do want to say thank you to our ministry partner, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, for hosting our webinar platform. They're a great partner that we have in this region and serving the same churches, trying to get churches to get on mission and stay on mission. So we're thankful for their partnership. And then I want to tell you that one of the bylines for Waypoint is that we are navigating ministry together. And today, probably that's just a great phrase for what we're talking about today, is we are navigating uncharted waters. We've heard the word unprecedented probably more in the last week than we've heard in any kind of time. And that's the times we are in. But together is what we're doing today, is we wanted to gather as many leaders and ministers in the region and talk about what we've been hearing. And so the guys on the call today, our staff, talked early Monday morning, and then since then we have just been talking with ministers for the last 2 days, and I couldn't tell you how many ministers we've talked to between the four of us, but probably at least 40 or 50, if not more. And so we just want to get you involved in the conversation that we're having. We will have a time for Q&A at the end here. My goal is to be done within the hour before we hit 11 o'clock. So we cannot talk all day long, but we at least want to talk about 3 or 4 pretty critical ideas that are common themes that we're hearing from the leaders that we have been talking with over the last 48 hours or so. And so to do that, first of all, we've got, I don't know what order they're showing up on your screen, but we've got Paul Vyers, who is our staff person down in Abingdon, Virginia, in the Appalachian area in Upper East Tennessee and Virginia, and even up into in the Eastern Kentucky in that region. And he's been on our staff just for the last year. And then we've got Neil Wheeler, who is our Director of Leader Care, lives in Richmond, been there forever. And then Dave Heilman, our former Executive Director, now our Associate Director, who is down in the Raleigh area, serving churches and leaders in North Carolina. And so we have been spending our time trying to hear from and converse with leaders about how the church can be at its best during this time. As most of you are probably aware, this is a time of challenge and opportunity for the church. And it's how we juggle those two realities is the way that our leadership is going to be affected here in the next several weeks. And I don't know if you all figured this out, but the church changed on Sunday. Many of your churches for the very first time streamed their services, or many of your churches canceled their services so that streaming was the only way that your church could meet. Or for some of you, your church didn't meet at all on Sunday. And so at the end of watching 3 services online on Sunday, I thought to myself, the church just changed today, big picture. The implications of what just happened are going to be long-reaching for the church, not just for the next week or 2 or 3 or however long this takes for us to get back to some level of normalcy, but in some ways, in a very functional way, the church changed. And so I want to ask a couple of questions about that before we get into this. On the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. And so if you've got a question that comes up as we're talking, go ahead and hit that Q&A button. It's better than the chat button. The chat button goes out to everybody and can get confusing. But if you hit the Q&A, we get a queue of questions that we'll try and answer either at the end of our session today or after the fact. We get a report of all the questions that we can respond via email. But I'd like to drive a couple of polls right now, one for our ministry partner, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, just to know how many people are joining us during this session. Is it just you on your computer, or are there several people viewing today? We'd like to be able to tell our friends at MacU how many people are joining our 2 sessions today. We're anticipating 120, 150 leaders or more today from our region joining our sessions. And so we want to be able to tell them the good news about that. And so if you would chime in on that, but that'll get you primed for a couple of polls that I want to drive specifically about that idea that from a real perspective, our church has changed in the way that we're just physically driving our Sunday morning worship services. We want to talk a lot more than just that today, but I think that was the catalyst of everything going on, is how we're going to do church on Sunday when every day the restrictions seem tighter and tighter on if you should meet, and if so, how many. It originally was 1,000, then 500, then 250, then 100, then 50, and the latest recommendations are 10 or less. And so how do we operate just our normal worship services? But as those numbers get smaller and smaller, then it affects even other gatherings that our church normally has. So if you would chime in there, we've got just a few more people to chime in on the poll. How many people are viewing your this session on your computer right now? All right, I'm going to close that. We've got good representation there, although not everyone, and we'll extrapolate that by average, because I want to drive a second poll here and ask about last Sunday. This last Sunday, how did your church worship last Sunday on March 15th? They had their normal services, just everything was normal, or did you add live streaming maybe for the first time? Did you only live stream? Did you record and broadcast that, or did you not meet at all? And so, oops, I forgot to launch that. It's hard for you guys to chime in if I don't launch it. So we've got currently 83 computers logged in today. So if you'd log in, I'm just really curious of the distribution of where we landed this last Sunday. And then I'm going to ask the same question relative to this coming Sunday, so we can see how much of a difference just this week has meant for us. But it looks like about 40% currently, as the numbers are coming in, were everything as usual. So 2 out of 5. And then another 20% added live streaming. So 3 out of 5 did services plus live streaming. And then live streaming recorded or no worship added up to about 40%. So 2 out of 5 churches had no actual gathering. And I saw some numbers just last night from, might have been Lifeway or someone else online, that those were that's about exactly what they said from national numbers as well, about 60%, 40%. So I'm gonna end that poll, even though we're only 2/3 logged in, or 75% logged in, and share the results with you. Hopefully you can see that. Live streaming only was 20%, 1 in 5, 26%, so a quarter of the churches recorded or no gathering, and then 36% and 18%. So we had 54%, a little bit more than half, did worship this past Sunday. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing that one. And then I want to now launch, by comparison, this coming Sunday, your current plans for normal services, adding live streaming with normal services, live streaming only, or recording, or no gathering whatsoever. Now we're at 75%. All right, so I'm going to end that poll and show you by comparison. Oops, cancel. I want to share results. There you go. So by comparison, this coming Sunday, only 10% are going to be having in-person services. And then the other 90% are either no gathering, 13. So one out of 6 churches are not going to gather at all. and then 77%, 3 out of 4 churches, are going to stream either live or by recording. So that's a dramatic shift just in the last couple of days, isn't it? And so I'm going to stop sharing that. So as I was viewing services online on Sunday from my home, I was upstairs. I watched 3. My wife was downstairs. She went to 5 churches, different churches, which in and of itself is a fascinating way to, usually when you church shop, you can only go to one church that's not yours on a Sunday, maybe 2 if you're really assertive and go to an early service somewhere and a later service somewhere else. But my wife and I went to like 8 different churches on Sunday. That in and of itself, if you think about it, is going to be a significant change in the way people could do church in the future. So, but what I don't want to get wrapped up in is, even though that's a challenge, I think there's some challenges. I want to ask Dave and Neil and Paul to maybe even chime in on how the church changed on Sunday and some of the challenges and opportunities. But what I would say is, it's not the end of the world. The church around the world has always been at its best. There have been articles. I posted an article yesterday from the Gospel Coalition about how the church has always been at its best during pandemics, going back to 200 and 300 and 1400 and 1800 in different parts of the world, and the church was at its best. And I think that I was reminded of the Apollo 13 movie that's now 25 years old, which is really sad to think about. But I want to go and share this slide. Maybe you remember Ed Harris, the actor, given this line after the NASA director said, "This is going to be the biggest catastrophe in the history of NASA." And then Ed Harris, who was the flight director for Apollo 13, said, "With all due respect, sir, I believe this is going to be our finest hour." And that's what I was thinking on Sunday, was in the middle of all this mess, as just our whole mission as a church is exploding like that lunar mission, what's going to happen? How are we going to get everything back to safety? I'm thinking we've got an opportunity here for this to be the finest hour for the church in our generation. And the question is, how are we going to do that? And so that's the conversation we want to have today, is to talk about the challenges. Number one, like the challenges on Apollo 13, they had challenges, or it would have been a really short movie, but also the opportunities that lie ahead for it to be the best thing that ever happened to us. So Dave, Neil or Paul, I don't know if you have any just opening comments about big picture, how the church just changed in the last week or so.
I would definitely just agree with what you said, Tim, about, I told even our staff on Monday, this is going to be one of those 9/11 moments where we go back and point to and say, that was a moment that forever changed not only how we do community, society, travel, all that kind of stuff, but also as a church. But I also can't help but think that God is going to use this to prepare, especially the American church, for what could come and what is to come. I think, we're kind of behind the church and the rest of the world, in that we're dependent upon a weekend gathering, and we define church so much around what happens in our buildings on Sunday mornings. And really the majority of the church around the world doesn't even function that way. And yet they're actually more effective in making disciples than we are in some parts of the world. And so, as we think about our nation, and at some point it may become illegal for us to gather in these ways for political reasons, and as we lose religious freedoms, God's getting us ready, I think, and preparing us for what does it look like to do church outside the American norm. And so there's a part of me as a church leader that's kind of excited. I'm not excited about the pandemic that we're experiencing, but I am excited about that challenge for the church, answering those questions.
Yeah, there are parts of the world where it's illegal to gather in groups 10 or larger without government permission. I know of a country that's the current policy. And so that country, the church has existed in groups of 10 or less. That's what they do, and that church is growing in that country. And so we've got a lot to learn from the rest of the world. Dave or Neil, any other thoughts about that?
Not really. I'm just on board with you.
All right. So first of all, I think we could talk about, first of all, just us as leaders, before we get into some logistics of what our church can be doing. I think we should talk about the people that are on the call today, on the Zoom call today. this webinar is, what does your church need to hear from you this week? So I want to ask that question. What does the church need to see, the leadership that they need from you? Because the church is looking, in the church context, they're looking to you as the leader or use the leaders. And so between staff and elders and other leaders at your church. And so I want to throw this open to Paul and Dave and Neil about some of the things that we think, having heard from leaders, what your church needs to be hearing from you. So go ahead, guys, chime into that.
Sure, Tim. I think one of the key things that I heard from leaders is that our churches just need to have us as leaders make decisions and share those decisions. And I heard across the board that we're just going to leave this open to every small group, every group in our church to decide whether they're going to meet or not and how they're going to meet. But I really believe that to be able to help our folks best, we just need to make decisions and make it clear and make them early as we can to let them know what we as a church are going to do as far as meeting or those types of things.
It takes a lot of courage, but it takes the stress off of our congregations as well. They're not wondering what they should do.
Yeah, that's something that we've heard, is that there's just a lot of conversations in these loops of text loops or email loops. What are we doing? And for the church leaders to come out and say, this is what we're going to do, and this is the plan. I think people just breathe a sigh of relief and say, okay, now I know what's going to happen. And then stick with that, and to give them, as of today, you can always say, as of today, this is our plan. It may change, and we'll communicate that. But as of today, this is what we're going to do this weekend or next week or whatever. What else, guys, do you think our people need to be hearing from us as leaders?
One thing some of the fellows stressed was that different groups in your church need to hear different things. What's appropriate for one group is not necessarily everything you need to share with another group. And in particular, those who are most vulnerable or more isolated, they're going to need a different kind of encouragement, different kind of support than those who are not in that category. So don't just think one broad message once a week is sufficient. This needs to be done day after day, and it needs to be targeted and specific to the groups so that you're meeting their needs, not just the general population's need.
Yeah, in one way I can think of that as, it's a little bit different on this, but often with corporate communication, you think of concentric circles, that there's your crowd, everybody that's on your database and what they need to hear, and then your church, and then your core, and then your leaders, and then your staff and elders or whatever, and that each one of those circles might have a different level of detail that you would give them, or different sensitivity of information that you would give them. And so in this case, it might be not only those concentric circles, but you might have a special circle over here of just those people who are self-quarantining, and what are you going to talk to them about, or other unique groups. But at the same time, to think it's not just plastering all your information out there at one time, but it's different things for different classes of people. That's great input.
And also, one of the things that I was struck by some of our younger leaders, our millennial leaders, is how not only do you communicate different information to those groups, but using different platforms to communicate that information. Facebook that's to communicate to the crowd. Everybody's going to hear that. And so be sensitive to that fact that it's not going to be just your church people, but everybody's going to hear what's put out there. But then Instagram, they seem to indicate that Instagram is a little more personal, and then email obviously is very targeted, and then text message, phone calls. And so even how you're communicating that is important too. But the thing that I've been thinking about, especially as I've been watching the news and Facebook, is, I think we as church leaders need to calm some of the political unrest that has been a part of this early on. I've been pleased with the change in tone, I think, among our political leaders in the last couple of days, both Democrat and Republican, that even when they're disagreeing on certain things, at least they're coming together, that this is an issue that we need to come together as a nation, as a people to address. And I've seen even church people, some church leaders who have tried to jump on that political bandwagon. And I was continually reminded of Romans 13, where Paul said, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Verse 4, he says, for the one in authority is God's servant for your good. And we need to remind our people that this is not a political attack upon the church. This is a health issue. It's a social issue. And as a church, we need to be leading, I think, that march to say, we need to be supporting our leaders, praying for our leaders, both Republican, Democrat. Even in our services on Sunday, I prayed for our Republican president, our Democratic, our Democrat governor, and all those local governor officials to say, man, we just want God to give them wisdom. And as a church, we support them because we recognize that they're not trying to attack our spiritual freedom or our religious freedoms here. They're trying to protect our society. And I think as leaders, we need to lead the charge in that conversation.
Yeah, one of our young fellas said, we're letting our church know that we're following both the science and the faith. And I thought that was a good line.
Yeah, that was a great line.
Tim, it seems to me that we need to cast the vision of opportunity at our doorstep, continue over and over and over again, not one time, that God's given us great opportunity. But I think that people need to hear over and over and over again from us, keep your eyes open for chances to just be able to love on people and serve people and be the gospel with people.
Yeah. And then one of the other things one of the guys said to us that really struck me is, this is not a joke. And so, especially in these early days, be cautious of how you use humor. Some of us like to use humor to break the tension, but this is not, there are people around the world who are, and now in our backyard, who are, this is life and death to them. And so we need to be careful about how much humor we inject into our conversations too.
Yeah. That's great input, guys. And I want to, some people have already posted some questions. So thanks for hitting the Q&A button. If you've got questions along the way, go ahead and type those in. And someone asked about the survey results. I will post those. You're going to get a follow-up email tomorrow. And I'm going to combine the results from both of our webinars this morning and this afternoon as far as the results of what churches are doing, although I think they're going to end up being fairly similar. That second poll showed that only about 10% of churches, 1 in 10, are having church as normal next week or this coming Sunday. And we will send some other links and the slides to you as well. So that's one of the questions that was raised. You guys kind of answered this already, but I wanted to share this going back to kind of what Neil said right there is, I love this quote from A.W. Tozer, the theologian, a scared world needs a fearless church. That I think we are the ones as leaders who need to be casting the vision. What they need to be hearing from us is the opportunity that the church has to be the church at its best. Because as leaders, that's the vision. Followers sometimes don't think that first, and as leaders, we're thinking that, and so that does not go without saying. You may have seen this online. I saw it online first. It said a fearful world needs a fearless church, or a frightened world needs a fearless church, and I looked it up because it's actually. Tozer actually said scared. Someone else online changed it for him to make it sound better. But I think that's the opportunity that we have as leaders. What they need to hear from us is that if we have the right lenses on, this is a tremendous opportunity for the church to be seen by the world in this generation like it never has before. As the hands and feet of Jesus. And maybe you've seen the other quote. This one was long before this week, but Mr. Rogers said, when I was a boy, I'd see scary things in the news. My mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping. And I think that's so true that the scary stuff in the news, the church can be seen as the helpers. That we are the ones have to figure out as leaders how we can give both help, number one, but also hope. As leaders, those are the two big categories I think that we need to be focusing on right now is help in practical ways, but hope in spiritual ways. And if we stay in that and stay out of the politics, number one, and some of the accidental joking, that I like to alleviate tension with humor, but you got to be careful how that's going to be taken. I think Paul's exactly right on that we have an opportunity to lead the church into places where it's never been in our generation. And so we got to capitalize on that. Well, let's shift gears right now and talk about how we can interface. I don't want to get into the what are you going to do on this Sunday. It looks like most churches are figuring out we've got to broadcast our services, live streaming or recorded or something. And we don't have the time in this webinar to deal with how do you best do live streaming. Although I think there's a lot of churches that are trying to figure out how we can do that better. But the question is how do we interface with our church during the week when we're not able to have that solid slot on Sunday morning that we're going to interface with them personally. And so we've been asking our leaders how they're strategizing on still keeping their community of faith alive in a virtual context over the next several weeks or months while the church is being restricted to gatherings, very small gatherings. And so what are you guys hearing from our leaders about creative or strategic ways that they're going to keep the communication and the interaction among the local church body alive?
Sure, Paul. I'm sorry, Tim. I talked with one church leader at a good-sized church here in Virginia, and they had already, and this was Tuesday morning early, they had already determined how they were going to divide up their people, everybody 65 and up in their congregation, to have not just a phone call with them, but to have every week we're going to touch those individuals. And I was thinking about that, Tim, and I was thinking for a long, long time when I was in pastoral ministry, I mean, our shepherding and really eldering Bible to our textbook was Anderson's They Smell Like Sheep. And we talked constantly about when we got together for elders meetings, it wasn't business. It was, okay, how are we stinking this week? You know, how are we smelling like our people? And I think even though we can't come in perhaps contact with everybody, what an opportunity for our elders and deacons and small group leaders, man, to connect with their people overboard. And the reason I think that's so important is when this is all said and done, and even now, but when it's all said and done, there are going to be people that will be saying, I can't believe how my church connected with me. They were just with me and walked with me. And there will be other people that'll say, I didn't get a phone call. Nobody reached out to me. And the reputation that's being built, this is a huge opportunity.
I talked to a young pastor.
Even to go, don't forget, we all have telephones. And that's probably, to hear somebody's voice, you personally called me, wherever they are, hospital, nursing home, wherever they are, we can do this.
I talked to a young pastor this week in his early 30s who called 12 shut-in senior adult ladies this week. And man, that kind of personal touch is huge. And I can affirm that Neil really stinks of that. So anyway, I appreciate that.
That's right.
I would say too, one of the ideas that we heard yesterday that I thought was really brilliant was the church that particular church had 2 or 3 counselors or therapists in it, as well as some other folks who had some skills. Yeah. And they were doing, 10-minute block calls for, basically pastoral ministry and or therapy, listening to the people so they could kind of gather information on the handful who might need some serious immediate follow-up or were emerging into a place where it wasn't very healthy for them. And so a regular basis to to address that kind of a need. That was really well done, really well thought out.
Yeah, one of the things that I know, Neil or Tim, you don't want to get into the weeds on this, but all of you church leaders, you do need to begin, if you haven't already, like our staff's been really investigating the pros and cons of all the different digital online platforms, Zoom, Google Hangout, all those kind of things. You do need to figure out how that's going to work for you, because like all these options, the counseling and one of the things that most churches are doing, their small groups are going online. They're all going to be in this kind of Zoom meetings, Google Hangout meetings, Skype, whatever platform you choose. But we talked with a small group leader just last night, and he'd already canceled his small group. It's like, no, we're not canceling it. We're just moving it to Zoom. He's like, man, this is a great idea. And we actually had a Zoom meeting with our elders last night. And so it's actually an opportunity not just to continue to meet with your small groups, but to multiply your small groups. This is a great time to say, hey, you are in this time where you may be quarantined or shut in, you need community more than you've ever needed community before. And we have the technology to do that. We even heard one small group that went together and bought a tablet for an elderly lady who didn't have it, and set it up for her and delivered it on her front porch so that she could connect to their small group. And what a great opportunity we've got here. We're the church that I serve in Abingdon. We're hoping we'd love to double the number of people that we have involved in groups during this, because we feel like it's a time when people are going to be looking for community. So using these platforms.
And those things can also be outreach. Every single person in your church knows someone in their neighborhood or on their street that doesn't go to church, doesn't have a lot of social interaction. A phone call from someone just saying, hey, we just wanted to know how you're doing, or if you need anything. It's going to go a long way over time to supporting your community in an active fashion.
Yeah.
Dave, that is so critical, and just being able to touch our neighbors but could I slip back to this other issue about connecting with each other? Tim, when we were having our staff meeting on Monday morning, I think it was Tim that just mentioned to us, we can do online church with anybody, and any of us who think that we can outdo the online church of the biggest church in town. And it's not even the church in town, it's the church anywhere. We're crazy.
Atlanta.
Yeah, we're crazy.
Chicago.
To do that.
That's right.
And so, but the issue is they will not connect with your people.
That's right.
So for you to be able to figure out, not just about how to stream your services, you got to do that, but it's about connecting with your people. Chris Barris yesterday, I thought, had a great idea. Number one, he said, we're going to shorten, I'm going to shorten my sermon, way down shorten my sermon, and then have a live Q&A session so that people can live interact with me and with our staff. That's brilliant. But those online touches within your community, man, that's going to hold your people together strongly.
The other thing I would say about the weekend service is we're hearing a lot of different ideas about how church, there's not one way to do that. You don't feel like if you can't do a full production praise band, basically mimic your Sunday morning by video, live stream, or recording. Don't stress that, because, we've got large churches that we know of that are doing just packaging a do-it-yourself home worship service. And so they're capitalizing on this is home church. And so it's going to feel different. It's going to look different. We're going to provide you some video teaching. Here's some questions and scriptures and responsive readings that you can do among your family. I know, we don't want to encourage inviting people over to your house, but if there's opportunity for that, but to make it to where people can take that and use it at home, video ahead of time. It doesn't even need to be high production. Use what you have. That's my point. Use what technology you have in the best way that you can. Personalize it, and people are going to want to hear from you. They want to hear what you have to say, even if it's not the best quality video out there on the internet. So,
however, if you're with somebody or you have a church that has high quality capacity, reach out to some of the other churches in your area. Open up your stage, open up your your sound booth and all that equipment, so that they might be able to do a little bit more positive sounding and appearing stream that they can record and do later. That's been done here in Raleigh, and it's been very effective.
Yeah, I think you do have to figure out, and I'm thinking about this in terms of passive and active communication. Passive is when you ask people to come view your stuff, like your online service. And that's got to be some level of the best quality you can reasonably do. But you can't compete with the church of 20,000, in some other state. So you've got this week and next week to make that as good as possible. Active communication is where your communication is towards a particular person rather than asking a large group of people to come to your video. And so so I think over the last week, we've been really trying to figure out how to do passive communication, how we can figure out Sunday morning. But what we're encouraging you to do is now to start strategizing on how you can do active communication, where it's during the week, more regular touches with your faith community, so that they feel like they're part of your church, even in this weird virtual time. So we've already described several of those ways. And so, like, your small groups can meet online. You need to lead people to figure out how to do that, make a decision. That's what we're going to do. We're going to use this service, and this is what we're going to do. And they will breathe the sigh of relief that you've made that decision for them, rather than them going out and figuring out how to do it. Have text. Remember the old phone chains back in the old days when I was a kid? My mom she'd get a call from somebody and she'd call somebody else. It's kind of old school pastoring with a virtual technology. Thankfully, the church has technology now that we've never had that we can leverage for this opportunity. Thanks to Facebook Live that just came online just a few years ago, that basically the church in America is going to attend church this Sunday for free because of Facebook Live and other streaming services. So we've got opportunities that we can capitalize. I love the fact that Paul said, can we capitalize on this to get more people in small groups, not just figure out, can we get some people in small groups, but can we actually do more than we normally do as a result? And so you can have prayer meetings, elders meetings, whatever, online in this kind of a format. There's some creative ways that we've heard in the last day that you can be interfacing with your church people, so that they feel like they're part of something while we're stuck in our homes and we don't even know if we're allowed to go to the grocery store or wherever. And so a couple that we have seen, guys, let me know if you've seen any of these. I just saw Dave posted from the East 10th Street Church in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. They're putting out a weekly smile, what's it called? Something smile page, but it's just people telling bad dad jokes. And they're so bad, they're almost funny, but it's something to look forward to, that in the middle of this craziness, the church is saying, hey, we're connecting with you this week. We saw another church that in the Williamsburg area, Life Point Church in Toano, that created a March Madness with Disney movies, and you get to vote, or you fill out your bracket, but then they're going to progressively every few days expose which of the movies won each particular game. So you got to keep tracking with that to see if your family's bracket is winning the Disney March Madness, since there is no college March Madness. And that has nothing to do with church, but it has something to do with keeping your church people engaged in your church community during the week, so they don't feel so isolated, even when we're now in this weird virtual church world. So those are a couple, but any other that you guys have heard of ways that churches are interfacing with each other during the week?
Just to give credit or blame, those bad dad jokes are called Smile Time with Jason Yates, and I thought they were very clever.
Some guys were talking about doing even fitness challenges, that kind of thing, during their time at home. Anything to create that kind of community, so to keep people connected.
And that I do want to say that we are going to be posting many of these ideas on the Waypoint Facebook page over the next several days and weeks for you to generate ideas. And so if you have a great idea that's working at your church in any of these ways, please email them to us. We can filter out which ones we can post and in a good rhythm. So don't just plaster it onto our page, but if you'd email it to us, then we can post things that are fairly regular, the great ideas for churches to consider in these ways. And so please look for that. So we'll be putting resources that are available and great ideas that we're seeing from churches. Let's transition a little bit to the next idea, which is what are ways that we can be interfacing with our community in new ways in the midst of this strange time that we're in this weird world, but we can use it as an opportunity to interface with our community in ways that they might never have interfaced with us previously.
One of the things I heard a church locally that they're doing is that most of our school systems are providing food for children as needed, and so one thing is to connect with our schools just to make sure they know, hey, we're available. What can we do to help? But one church is actually trying to provide a box of food to give to the families of the children who are getting the daily meals. And so maybe once a week, there would be a box that would be given to that family to help in a broader scale. And so you're able to engage your church. They're able to bring items, drop them off, then you create those boxes and then hand them out once a week to the families that are taking advantage of the free meals at the school. So,
yeah, that's a great one.
Tim, Tim, I'm sorry. I had an idea from a guy in a relatively small town that said he realized that it was time to connect churches in their town together interdenominationally. And we heard that from a couple of people, the importance of doing that. And I, when I was in pastoral ministry, man, I did that all the time in the community I lived in because I wanted to know what the Methodist Church, who they were connecting with, or the Baptist Church. And it was a way that we could share ideas and information and how we're touching. This guy just did suggested doing a Facebook group for your local pastors, and then just inviting leaders to be a part of that, just so you can share ideas. I just thought that was tremendous.
Yeah, I love that idea. Without preaching, in the high priestly prayer of John 17, Jesus said that the world gets to vote on whether they believe he was sent by God based on our unity as Christians. What a powerful message we can send in our local community that the church at large is working together across denominational lines. There are denominational distinctions. We have to admit that, but we can work across denominational lines at a time like this, and to show the world that's skeptical about the church that we can work together for the good of the whole community. And so, and we can be leaders in that there might be other denominational leaders in your church that are not thinking that way. And you can be the one in your local area, your hyper-local area, the 4, 5, 6 churches right nearest you, to say, hey, let's get together by Zoom if needed be, so you don't cough on each other or whatever, but you be the leader in your community to bring the church at large together. And I think that's a really powerful opportunity that we have in our local community.
I think that, Tim, another idea that we got from one of our young leaders who's also very connected in a leadership role in his local fire department. The idea is our fire department, our first responders, our hospital workers, they're overstressed. So let's take them food trays or whatever. Don't do that. They cannot even accept that. Love on them and so, but they just can't receive that. So that was something not to do.
Yeah, that's you can't go visit nursing homes for isolated people, going to the hospitals. We've got to figure out virtual ways, but personal virtual ways, not broadcast to, hey, here, everybody at my church. It's, hey, Sally, I was praying for you today. Hey, Joe, how can we serve you this week? Old school pastoring with technology that we can leverage today is going to be really powerful. We've seen a church that's using quarantine boxes from people that are self-quarantining, that they're delivering things to their door in the name of their church. And not just from within their church family, but people in the community that they know are being quarantined. They're taking them boxes for the front door. I think that's a great way to connect with the community. What else?
We were, I was trying to see, here's another, to kind of go along with that. This is a resource that we've been handing out, that we've created for our church. It's just something that people can leave if they know someone in their community has quarantined. You can leave this on their doorstep and just leave information and say, hey, how can I help you? So it's just a way to empower our people to personally connect with people in their own community as well. We're really encouraging, a lot of churches are really encouraging their people. Hey, you need to identify the 10 homes around you. That's your circle of influence. How can you lead the way in serving them and providing for them? And we as a church want to be a resource to you to help you get that done.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe you've seen in the last day that several grocery stores and others are now dedicating particular shopping hours to those who are senior citizens. And because I was trying to think yesterday morning, if I were trying to interface with those that are the most affected by this, how would I do that? And so the Dollar General right up the road from me has an hour every day that those people are going to be coming to the Dollar General, and only those people. And so I could stand there at the door, or a group from my church, and say, hey, how can we serve you? Do you have any errands that need to be run? Or do you need, go to pick up stuff from the pharmacy or whatever? Is that there are ways that we can leverage what we're seeing in the news to have eyes towards how can we serve the people in our community with needs that they have that they have to be met. All right.
Tim, this is going back just a little bit, but a couple things that actually came in that I think are great ideas to share with everybody. One is, this is more about digitally connecting with our people. Somebody shared that some churches are doing a nightly 30-minute session. And you could do that either nightly or periodically through the week, where the worship leader's just singing a few songs with a guitar or piano, and pastor just leaves a real quick devotional. And so it's just just another touch. The other thing I've heard from like children's ministry, student ministry, we haven't spoken about that, but children's, to create packets for your parents to lead Bible studies with their kids. Orange has some great resources available on that. I'm sure there's a lot of other ones as well. My wife is a kindergarten teacher. She's actually going to be meeting with her students from school via Zoom, just to stay connected with them, with her kindergarten students. And so, man, getting Sunday school teachers to connect with their Sunday school class during this would be awesome. Kids love my 2-year-old granddaughter last night at our elders meeting was in my lap looking at herself on the screen. And so to be able to see your Sunday school teacher or your youth minister, or whatever, in this setting, would be huge as well. So.
Yeah, that's huge. I want to transition and kind of wrap this around. We do have a couple of questions on that we've been driven. One is about maybe having an or a drive-in kind of church, where people drive in and you do church PA. I know that you can rent a hyper-local AM radio frequency that kind of like old school drive-in, and you could do that and have some kind of community where you're not in your homes, but you're not gathering in groups of 10 because you're all in your cars. That's a fascinating idea. And one question was about sermon series. We're going to try and post sermon series about fear or anxiety or things like that we can share with each other. I would be working with other pastors in that way. We did talk about the food distribution.
The financial question there, if you don't mind, Tim, too.
I don't know if I saw the financial. Oh, we're getting them in.
Question was about handling financial fallout that will come from this, a drop of giving because they're not gathering, or other issues that might come later on. And if your church does not already have an online giving platform, obviously this is the time to get that done. And there are plenty of people who have done that very well in the Waypoint footprint, and they can help you, I'm sure, just reaching out to one of us and we can connect you with them. But that will be a problem downstream that we haven't really talked significantly about, but we will do that at some point.
Yeah. And again, just strategically sitting down with your team. I'm work with Waypoint, but also lead a church in Abingdon, and we're a church of 500 to 600 and several staff, and so we sat down and just, how can we cut corners? What can we do? Now that we're not doing church like we did, are there portions of the building that we can shut down to try to save some cost there? We've actually, in anticipation, we have a mortgage on a building, so we're already talking to our financial people to say, is there any way we can get some relief for this next month or two until we see how things are progressing? But also just communicating to our congregation to encourage them with online giving. Hey, we want this to be a first century church experience where people become very generous. Now we know a lot of our folks are going to struggle financially, but we want to bring to the storehouse so that it can be distributed to all those who are in need. And so one of the ways that we're going to do that is communicate, hey, here's some of the specific steps we're taking to try to reduce our expenses, to reduce our costs during this period of time. But we still need you. We need you. And giving is still an act of worship. And so in our weekend service that we're putting out there, we're including giving just as the same as we always did, and just encouraging them to give online as a part of their weekend worship experience as well. So
we had another question about that card that Paul just posted. We are going to post as many of these resources that we've used today and others to the email list of people that joined our webinar today specifically, but also on our Facebook page in general. And so we will try and give you as much of these resources after the fact that you'll receive tomorrow in the automated email that comes from this webinar. So to kind of wrap up, I want to share this slide that we were talking about at the end of one of our conversations yesterday that I think is a great question for us this week. At the end of this, and we don't know when the end is going to be, that's part of the frustrating part is, first of all, if you have not thought yet that you will not be worshiping for Easter potentially, you need to be thinking that there is now a very distinct possibility that you will be not in a large corporate gathering for Easter Sunday. I saw just this morning, watching ESPN early this morning, about all the late spring, early summer sporting events that are now being canceled. The Kentucky Derby is being postponed until September. And if you've ever lived in Kentucky, they don't move that very often. Last time was in 1945. That's May that's now being moved to September. And so Easter, you need to think about how long is this going to be? At the end of this, we don't know when the end is. That's part of the frustrating part. But at the end of this, what do you want to be remembered for as a church? You've got an opportunity over the next 3 weeks to really get a vision for how our church can be the hands and feet of Jesus, leveraging modern technology with old school pastoral care to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And how can you do that in a way that attracts the world to Jesus? And that's what we hope, that we continue this conversation here at Waypoint. We may have future pop-up webinars like this one where we continue conversations about some of these specific topics. But at the same time, that's the question that we hope that you're asking is, this will pass, whether it's 2 weeks or 2 months or 12 months, we don't know. But when this is over, what does your church want to be remembered for in your community? You got an opportunity to lead that way. So we pray that God gives you wisdom to figure that out for what it means for your church. The Bible teaches us in the book of James that we should ask God for wisdom because he loves to give it. And so as leaders, that's what we are praying for you for in specific, is not for answers, but for wisdom to figure this out in this crazy time. So thanks for joining us today. Please be communicating and connecting with us in things that you're seeing and hearing, questions that you have. We want to be able to either try and give you an answer or find you an answer in a way that helps you keep your church on track during this crazy time. So we'll be following up with you moving forward. and we want to stay in touch. Let me pray for you all right now as leaders, and then we will have a whole nother crew here this afternoon at 2:00. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I truly believe that with the empowerment of your Holy Spirit and the divine wisdom that you can give us when we ask for it, that in the next few days and weeks and months, this is going to be the church's finest hour. That we get to show the world what the body of Christ looks like and acts like and thinks like and what it values. So right now I'm praying that you would dispense in ways never seen before your wisdom and discernment on these leaders as they lead their churches. That's our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining, folks, and we will see you at another webinar in the future. Have a great day.